What's good, my tribe? This is day 58 of the 90-day YouTube challenge. Finally back home in my own space again after visiting my dad, getting the new car. And on the way back, I listened to a very interesting podcast with Aubrey Marcus and a professor of philosophy and cognitive science, I believe. His name was Jonathan Vervaeke. I think that's his last name. And it just got me really thinking about this idea of dialogos. He's very much, Jonathan Vervaeke is very much into sort of the Greek philosophy and reviving the old kind of Stoic, I guess if you can say, philosophy, and the idea of really holding space for a full dialogue is something that we've kind of lost in our society. And, everything's been sort of boiled down to sort of debates where people kind of instantly polarize to a certain, viewpoint or perspective, and they automatically assume that they are right, and they don't really open up space or anything for growth and being able to kind of still hold the other as a human, just like oneself. So he talked a lot about his workshops that he's been developing and doing. I think that he's been calling the dialogos circling. And what this does is it's a pretty cool template. He has people kind of start off with a centering meditation, followed by a contemplation to sort of expand one's perspective, realizing that there are many different layers to perspective. And then starts off with a sort of, then moves into talking about various philosophical viewpoints, getting to like a group flow where everyone has this sort of group coherence. And then from that point, starting with one person talking about a certain topic, such as a virtue, and having that person express what that virtue means. So the example that he used was honesty. So one would say, I propose honesty is, and say something about honesty or what they believe honesty is based off their perspective. And then the second person would respond to that, and they would kind of go back and forth, building off of each other, answering, expanding, asking more questions, to the point where that second person would feel like they finally understood what the first person was talking about. When they got to that point of understanding, that second person would then sort of read back what they had learned, and then from there discuss either what they agree with or what they thought was missing, and sort of expand upon that topic. And they would do this with every person kind of going around in the circle. So it's, they even did an example of it on the podcast, and it was just an amazing flow of conversation that was very different to hear, even on podcasts. Podcasts are probably, if anything, the space where people can really truly engage in a very deep dialogue. But there's still this sense of having a mask and, putting on a certain persona, especially with a podcast, especially a sort of larger or more well-known podcast. And so this was really cool to be able to sort of see a true dialogos, as he calls it, which is basically just opening up a space and a flow between many different people, two or more, to the point where the logos can kind of naturally manifest. And it was really, really cool to see. And it really got me thinking the idea of like how many times, I engage in a conversation and I'm always, having a certain thing to say or not. And rather than really going deep on reflecting on other perspectives and using the other person to really expand my perspective and to engage in a deep dialogue, A lot of times I'm actually very introverted, so a lot of times I actually kind of avoid that. I'm much rather stay silent and sort of stay quiet if I can. So, this is something that I thought was really interesting and something that I'd like to, start to bring more into my conversations, just in general, just being aware of, what my perspective is, being able to kind of hold that and the other's perspective at the same time. Another big thing that he kind of went into in the example was sort of watching the body language and how that body language relates to the concept that they are trying to talk about. How the hand, especially, either expands or contracts, rises or falls, how the facial expressions mimic, all this sort of nonverbal language that goes along with our communication, and how that either accentuates or further gives a clue into what is going on beneath the conscious mind. And so he would kind of call out the body language and say, your hand was doing this. Can you maybe explain why do you think that was doing that? And what do you think was going on there? And that would open up the conversation to a whole nother level. And he would go back and forth and say, like, well, this makes me think of this. And it was just very beautiful to see. And looking forward to possibly attending one of his workshops, maybe even starting some sort of dialogos circle myself. So I just wanted to share that. I thought it was really cool. So that's Jonathan Vervaeke. He was just on the Aubrey Marcus podcast. So yeah, maybe check him out. I think he has a YouTube channel. It sounds like a really brilliant guy that I definitely want to look more into. So yeah, thank you for listening. As usual, I hope you are well, with love and light. May peace be with you.